This is our second lesson in Chapter 2. This lesson is about complex fractions and unit rates. Our only new vocab word for this lesson is the word complex fraction, and it's really not a new vocab word because we saw it in Chapter 0. Complex fraction is a fraction with one or more fractions inside. So here's our example, 5/6 divided by 7/8. Remember, we read that large bar in the middle as a division sign, okay? So just to review what we do when we see a complex fraction, if we want to complete the division problem, first we take care of our outer numbers. We multiply them together. 5 times 8 is 40. Then we multiply the inners. 6 times 7 is 42. That goes in the denominator. And finally, we simplify by dividing by the GCF. GCF of 40 and 42 is 2, and that leaves us with the simplified fraction of 20/21. Okay, so that's a review of complex fractions. Here is your only note for lesson 1.2. A complex fraction is used to find a unit rate when a rate contains a fraction. Okay. Basically, what we're doing in this lesson is we're still doing the same thing we did in 1.1. We are finding unit rates. The only difference is in 1.1 we didn't have any fractions, but in 1.2 we do. Okay? So one more reminder for you: when we write rates, we want to put money in the top, time in the bottom. So look for money words, look for time words, and that will help you to set up your rate correctly every single time. So we have a practice problem here. This is not one of your practice questions in your notes, so I just want you to follow along. You can work on a separate sheet of paper if you'd like, or you can just watch and take it in. Okay, Horace is a competitive eater. He can eat 2.5 dozen hot dogs in a quarter of an hour. At this rate, how many hot dogs can he eat in 1 hour? Okay. So, Horace is a competitive hot dog eater. We need to talk about the rate at which Horace can eat hot dogs. So we've got two numbers here to set up our rate. We've got 2.5 dozen. We've got a quarter of an hour. Remember, it goes money in the top, time in the bottom. I don't see any money words, but I do see some time words. Hours is a time word. So I know that the 1/4 of an hour goes in the denominator, and that means my 2.5 dozen hot dogs will go in the numerator. I'm just going to put H for hot dogs, okay? So this is the rate at which Horace can eat hot dogs. Now we want to take that rate and we want to solve for a 1 in the denominator. We want to figure out how many dozen hot dogs Horace can eat in 1 full hour. Okay, so remember, to change a rate to a unit rate, we divide by the denominator. So we divide here by a quarter. We're going to divide the numerator by 1/4 as well to keep our ratios equivalent. And we're going to show our work down below. 2.5 stays in the numerator. 1/4 is the denominator, and we're going to do the complex fraction to divide. Now remember something, before we can divide, we have to change our mixed number into an improper fraction. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Keep your same denominator, and now we can do our outers and our inners. 5 times 2 is 10, that goes in the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. Wait, I'm struggling today. That goes in the denominator, and we can simplify by dividing by the GCF, which is 2. That gives us 5/1, or just plain old 5. So my 5 goes in the numerator here, and that tells me that Horace can eat 5 dozen hot dogs if he eats at that same rate for 1 full hour. That is gross. All right, so I have another question based off of our answer for the first part here. It asks, okay, so let's say Horace can keep up this eating pace for 3 hours. How many hot dogs can he eat in 3 hours? Well, let's bounce back here. In 1 hour, he can eat 5 dozen hot dogs. Okay, 5 dozen hot dogs in 1 hour. So if we want to know how many hot dogs he can eat in 3 hours, that means we have to multiply by 3 to change 1 hour into 3 hours. Multiply the numerator by the 3 so we can keep our ratios equivalent. And that would tell me that Horace can eat 15 dozen hot dogs in 3 hours. That sounds very unlikely. I think he would be very sick. But that's, again, how we use unit rates. It really doesn't change much when we have fractions involved. We just use the complex fraction to do our division. Okay, so here's your to-do list. First, complete your practice problems for lesson 2. Update your flashcards with our only one new vocab word, which isn't really that new. It's complex fraction. When you're ready, it's now time to take quiz 1 for chapter 1. Quiz 1 will cover everything up to this point, and then once you've finished quiz 1, you can start working on the next lesson, which is 1.4.